The restaurant was loud, glasses clinking, relatives talking over each other, my aunt laughing too loudly at something my cousin said. It was my 30th birthday dinner, and the entire extended family had gathered around one long table in a private room at Riverside Grill in Charlotte, North Carolina. 30 people, parents, cousins, uncles, family friends, the kind of dinner where people pretend everything is perfect. My mother stood up with her wine glass. She tapped it lightly. The room slowly quieted. I remember smiling, because for the first time in my life, I thought this toast might actually be about me. Instead, my mother raised her glass and said something that made the entire room freeze. "The inheritance," she announced calmly, "will be going to your brother." And then she pointed across the table. At Ethan. Not at me. On my birthday. The room went silent. My brother leaned back in his chair with a smile that said he had already known. He even laughed. "Guess I'm finally opening that business," he said. Some relatives chuckled nervously. Others avoided eye contact. But the strangest moment of the entire night happened about 30 seconds later. Because that's when the restaurant manager walked over to our table. He looked directly at my brother, then he looked at my parents, and said a sentence that turned both of their faces completely pale. But before I tell you what he said, you need to understand how we got to that dinner. Because nothing about that moment was accidental. And my family had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. Before I continue, if you enjoy stories about family secrets, quiet justice, and moments where the truth finally comes out, make sure you subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read more of those comments than you might think. Now, my name is Lucas Bennett, and this story started long before my 30th birthday, in a quiet neighborhood just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. In my family, roles were assigned early. My younger brother Ethan was the golden child. I was the responsible one, which sounds good on paper. Until you realize it usually means you work harder, you get less attention, and when something good happens, it somehow becomes someone else's story. Ethan was 2 years younger than me, but you'd think he was the crown prince of the family. When he got a C in math, my parents hired a tutor. When I got straight A's, my mother would say, "Well, that's what we expect from you." Expectation is a strange kind of compliment. It means success stops being special. The first time I noticed the difference was when I was 16. I had just gotten into the state engineering summer program at UNC. It was competitive. Only 20 students from the entire state were accepted. I remember walking into the kitchen with the acceptance letter. My parents read it. My dad nodded. "Good," he said. That was it. 2 weeks later, Ethan made the junior varsity baseball team. My parents threw him a backyard barbecue. It wasn't cruelty. Not exactly. It was something quieter. A slow pattern. If Ethan needed something, the family rallied. If I needed something, the response was usually, "You'll figure it out." And to be fair, I usually did. I worked during high school, saved money, applied for scholarships. When I got into NC State University, I paid for most of it myself. My parents helped Ethan pay for community college, then helped him again when he dropped out. Then again when he started a business idea that never went anywhere. My parents called it support. I called it selective generosity. The first time inheritance came up was when I was 25. We were having dinner at my parents' house. My father had recently sold a piece of land the family owned. At one point, he said casually, "One day, all of this will go to you boys." I remember Ethan asking immediately, "How much are we talking about?" My father laughed, but my mother said something strange. "We'll make sure everything is fair." Fair. That word would come back years later, and not in the way anyone expected. While Ethan bounced between ideas, jobs, and short-lived projects, my career actually worked. I started in logistics consulting. Not glamorous, but stable. Within 5 years, I was managing regional operations for a transportation firm. The pay was good. The hours were long, but I liked the work. Eventually, I started a side project, helping small businesses streamline delivery systems. At first, it was just freelance work. Then it became something bigger, something profitable. But my parents never asked much about it, because Ethan always had a new plan to talk about. 3 months before my birthday dinner, Ethan called me. "Hey man," he said, "I'm thinking of buying into a small business." "What kind of business?" "A restaurant partnership." I asked him how he planned to finance that. He laughed. "Don't worry about it." At the time, I assumed he was exaggerating. Ethan had big plans every few months. Most of them disappeared within weeks. But this one didn't disappear. Because 3 weeks later, my mother called and invited the entire extended family to my birthday dinner. My mother insisted we celebrate big. 30 is a milestone, she said. She reserved the private dining room at Riverside Grill, invited cousins, aunts, even family friends I hadn't seen in years. It felt excessive, but I figured maybe my parents were finally proud. Maybe this dinner was their way of showing it. I was wrong. When I arrived at the restaurant that night, Ethan was already there, sitting comfortably, talking with my father. My mother hugged me, but something about the energy in the room felt rehearsed, like people were waiting for something. The dinner went normally at first. Food arrived. Drinks were poured. People told old family stories. Then my mother stood up with her wine glass. That was the moment the entire evening changed. My mother smiled warmly. "Tonight isn't just about Lucas turning 30, she said. She paused dramatically. "It's also about celebrating the future of our family." Then she raised her glass. "Your father and I have decided that our inheritance," she gestured across the table, "will be going to Ethan so he can finally open his business." I remember hearing forks drop onto plates. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Ethan grinned proudly. "I've got a great opportunity lined up," he said. My mother looked at me, like she expected me to smile. Instead, I just sat there quietly, because I already knew something they didn't. And that's when the restaurant manager walked over to our table. He cleared his throat, looked directly at my brother, then said calmly, "Sir, about the business you mentioned earlier." And what he said next made my parents' faces turn completely white. The restaurant manager stood beside the table, holding a small tablet in his hand. At first, I assumed he was just checking on the reservation, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking directly at my brother. "Sir," he said politely, "I believe you mentioned earlier that you're purchasing the Harbor Street location?" Ethan smiled confidently. "Yeah," he said. "That's the one." The manager blinked. Then he looked confused. "That's strange," he said slowly. "Because that location was already purchased last month." The table went silent again. Ethan frowned. "No, it wasn't." The manager tilted the tablet slightly. "It was," he replied. Then he added the sentence that made my parents freeze. "It was purchased by Lucas Bennett Enterprises." Every head at the table turned toward me. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Not my parents, not my brother, not my aunts. 30 people at the table were staring at me. Even the waiter stopped pouring wine. Ethan looked at me like he had misheard something. "What?" he asked. The manager looked between us. "You're Mr. Bennett, correct?" he asked me. I nodded calmly. "Yes." The manager smiled politely. "I thought so. Congratulations on the new location." Then he turned back toward the kitchen and walked away, leaving the entire table in stunned silence. Ethan was the first one to speak. What the hell is he talking about? His voice wasn't angry yet, just confused. My father looked at me. Lucas, did you buy that building? I took a sip of water before answering. Yes. No one moved. My mother's face had lost all color. That restaurant space? She said slowly. You bought it? Yes. Ethan leaned forward. You're joking. I'm not. The thing about secrets is that they usually don't explode. They leak. Slowly. Piece by piece. My side consulting project from years ago had turned into something bigger. Much bigger. What started as logistics consulting had evolved into a supply chain management company. We helped restaurants reduce costs, manage inventory, and improve delivery systems. 3 years ago, I bought my first location. 2 years ago, I bought another. Last month, I bought the Harbor Street property, the exact restaurant space Ethan had been bragging about opening. My mother tried to recover the moment. Well, she said nervously, that's wonderful news. But her voice didn't sound proud. It sounded unsettled, because her big announcement had just collided with a reality she didn't know existed. My father leaned back slowly. You own that building? He asked. Yes. And you didn't tell us? I shrugged slightly. You never asked. Ethan didn't like the direction this conversation was going. So what? He snapped. That doesn't change anything. He gestured toward my parents. They already said the inheritance is mine. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably, because suddenly the entire conversation felt awkward, not celebratory, transactional. My brother leaned toward me. So congratulations, he said sarcastically. But I'm still opening a restaurant there. I looked at him calmly. No. You're not. My father frowned. What do you mean? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document, the property contract. I placed it on the table. The building is already leased, I said, to one of our partner restaurants. Ethan stared at the document. You're lying. I slid the paper toward him. Look at the signature. He didn't need to, because he already knew. The lease agreement had been finalized 2 weeks earlier. My cousin whispered to her husband. My aunt shifted awkwardly in her chair. This dinner was supposed to celebrate Ethan's big opportunity. Instead, it now looked like he had been bragging about a business that didn't exist. My father rubbed his forehead. You said the space was available, he told Ethan. It was. Ethan pointed at me. He must have taken it after I told you about it. I shook my head. I bought the property a month before that. Ethan leaned back, frustrated. Well, good for you, he said bitterly. But Mom and Dad already decided the inheritance goes to me. I looked at him quietly. Then I said something I had been planning to say all night. You might want to check the paperwork. My mother stiffened. What paperwork? I met her eyes. The trust documents. Her expression changed immediately, because suddenly she realized something. I knew about them. My father looked confused. What trust documents? My mother spoke quickly. Lucas doesn't know what he's talking about. But I did. Because 6 months earlier, our family lawyer had called me. Apparently my parents were restructuring their estate. And the lawyer had asked a simple question. Are you aware of the amendment removing you from the primary beneficiary list? That phone call was the real reason I bought the Harbor Street building, the real reason I let this dinner happen, and the real reason my parents were about to discover something they never expected. 6 months before that birthday dinner, I was sitting in my office when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I ignore those, but something told me to answer. Lucas Bennett? The voice asked. Yes. My name is Daniel Hart. I'm the estate attorney for your parents. That sentence alone was strange, because I had never spoken to my parents' lawyer before, not once. Then he said something even stranger. I'm calling because your parents are making changes to their trust documents. I waited. He cleared his throat. And your name was recently removed as the primary beneficiary. At first I thought he had the wrong number. Removed? I asked. Yes. He sounded uncomfortable. Normally, I wouldn't contact beneficiaries directly, but because the original structure listed both children equally, the change required notification. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess, I said quietly. My brother stays. There was a pause. Yes. Most people would have reacted immediately, called their parents, started an argument, demanded explanations, but I didn't. Instead, I said something simple. Thank you for letting me know. Then I hung up. Because information is power, and the moment you reveal that you have information, you lose your advantage. Before I continue, if you've ever been the person in a family who finds out the truth last, you're not alone. And if you're still listening to this story, I appreciate you more than you realize. These things aren't easy to talk about. Before I continue, if you've ever been the person in a family who finds out the truth last, you're not alone. And if you're still listening to this story, I appreciate you more than you realize. These things aren't easy to talk about. People often assume silence means weakness. It doesn't. Sometimes silence means strategy. If my parents had called me and said, "We're giving everything to Ethan," that would have been one thing, but they didn't. They planned to announce it publicly, at my birthday dinner, which meant they wanted witnesses. They wanted approval. They wanted the moment to feel justified. So I decided to give them the moment they wanted. After that call from the lawyer, I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I started asking quiet questions. The first person I spoke to was the attorney again. Just so I understand, I asked, was the change requested by both parents? Yes. And was there a reason listed? There was another pause. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. Your mother stated that you were financially independent and did not require family support. That reasoning actually made sense, in a strange way. I had built my own company, bought property, invested wisely. Ethan had not. From my mother's perspective, giving the inheritance to Ethan probably felt like balancing the scales. But the problem with that logic is simple. Fairness and favoritism often look identical to the person doing the choosing. What my parents didn't know was that Ethan's life wasn't just unstable, it was dangerous. About 2 months before my birthday dinner, I learned something through a mutual friend. Ethan owed money, not normal debt, not credit cards, private investors, failed business partnerships, the kind of financial pressure that makes people desperate. Which explained something important. Why he suddenly needed to open a restaurant. The Harbor Street building had been available for months, but no one had purchased it. Restaurants are risky businesses. Margins are thin. But I didn't buy it because I wanted a restaurant. I bought it because of something the lawyer said at the end of our conversation. If the trust structure changes again, you may wish to review it personally. Review it personally, which meant something else could still happen. That's why I bought the building. That's why I stayed quiet. And that's why I let my mother invite 30 relatives to a birthday dinner that was never actually about my birthday. Because sometimes the only way to expose a lie is to let the person telling it believe they're winning. The entire table was staring at me. My mother's eyes were locked on mine. Ethan looked furious. My father looked confused. And my aunt whispered, "What trust documents?" My mother spoke quickly. "That's not relevant tonight." But I leaned forward calmly. "It is relevant," I said. Because the truth was, the trust documents contained something my parents had completely forgotten about. Something that made their inheritance announcement meaningless. And when I explained it, the entire room went silent again. The entire table was staring at me. My mother looked tense. My brother looked angry. My father looked confused. I leaned forward calmly. "You're right," I said to my mother. "The trust documents are very relevant tonight." My father frowned. "What trust?" I pulled my phone from my pocket. "The one you updated 6 months ago." My mother's face tightened immediately. "Dad," I said, looking at him directly, "did you read the entire amendment before signing it?" He hesitated. "Of course I did." I nodded slowly. "Then you probably remember the distribution clause." My father blinked. "What clause?" My mother cut in quickly. "Lucas, that's not necessary." But it was, because the clause said something very specific. The inheritance could only transfer to a child who was financially stable and free of active legal debt claims, and Ethan was neither of those things. My brother laughed. "That's ridiculous." But my father looked uneasy. "Debt claims?" he asked. I turned toward Ethan. "Did you tell them about the 2 investor lawsuits?" The room went completely silent. My brother's face went red. "There are no lawsuits." I slid my phone across the table. The court filing was right there. Public record. "If you're still here with me, thank you." Moments like this are uncomfortable to tell, but sometimes the truth only comes out when someone finally refuses to stay quiet. My father picked up the phone. He read the document slowly. Then his expression changed. "Ethan, what is this?" My brother's voice rose. "It's nothing. It says you owe $280,000. Ethan looked around the table desperately. "It's just business financing." But it wasn't. And everyone at the table could feel that now. My mother tried to regain control. "This is private family business." But the damage was done, because the trust clause meant something very simple. If Ethan had active financial disputes, the inheritance could not legally transfer to him, which meant the dramatic announcement she made 10 minutes earlier was meaningless. My father looked at me. "Lucas, why didn't you tell us about this?" I answered honestly. "Because I only found out recently." Then I added something that surprised everyone. "But that's not the real reason tonight matters." The entire table leaned forward. My mother's expression hardened, because she knew exactly where this was going. I turned toward Ethan. "You said you were opening a restaurant." He glared at me. "Yes." I gestured toward the dining room around us. "This restaurant?" The realization slowly spread across the table. My brother froze. "What?" I smiled slightly. "The Harbor Street property you wanted." I paused. "Is this building?" My aunt gasped. My father looked around the room. "You mean—" "Yes," I said. "I own the entire building. Not just the empty space, the whole property, including the restaurant we were currently sitting in." The manager hadn't interrupted earlier by accident. He was greeting the owner. Ethan stared at me. "You're lying." I gestured toward the entrance. Right on cue, the manager returned. "Mr. Bennett," he said politely, "we're ready for the dessert service whenever you are." Then he added something that made the entire room freeze again. "Also, the renovation plans for the second location are ready for your approval." My father looked stunned. My mother looked pale, because suddenly something had become clear. The son they thought needed the inheritance didn't. And the son they overlooked had built something far bigger than they realized. But the night wasn't finished yet, because there was still one thing I hadn't told them. I stood up slowly. 30 relatives watched. "I didn't come tonight to embarrass anyone," I said calmly. "This dinner was supposed to be about family." My mother looked relieved, until I continued. "So I actually brought something for everyone." I picked up a small envelope from the table. Inside was a printed document. I handed it to my father. "What's this?" he asked. "A partnership agreement." "For what?" "For the new restaurant location?" My father looked confused. "You're opening another one?" I nodded. "Yes." Then I looked at Ethan. And I wanted to offer you the job of managing it. Ethan blinked. What? My father stared at me. You're serious? Yes. My brother looked completely confused. You're offering me a job? I shrugged. I figured you wanted to run a restaurant. Ethan grabbed the document. What's the catch? There isn't one, I said. Just one rule. He looked up. No debt, no investors, no shortcuts. Just honest work. The kind of work I had been doing for the past 10 years. If you've ever had a moment where people underestimated you, you know something important. Success doesn't need to shout. Sometimes the best response is simply proving people wrong. And if you stayed with me through this story, thank you. There's another one waiting for you right now. And I think you'll enjoy that one too. The entire table watched Ethan. He looked at the document, then at me, then back at the paper. For the first time all night, he wasn't bragging. He was thinking. Finally, he asked quietly, "You're serious about this?" Yes. My father leaned back in his chair. I thought we were helping the wrong son, he said slowly. No one laughed, because everyone understood what he meant. My mother didn't speak, not for the rest of dinner. She just sat there quietly, because the control she thought she had over the story was gone. Dessert arrived. People started talking again. The tension slowly faded. But the atmosphere had changed. Everyone saw the family dynamic differently now. When people began leaving, my father stopped me at the door. "I'm proud of you," he said. It was the first time he had ever said that directly. And strangely, that mattered more than the inheritance ever could. That night wasn't about money, or property, or even family favoritism. It was about something simpler. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one building the future quietly. And sometimes the best birthday gift you can give yourself is letting the truth speak for itself.